everyone. This week's episode has a little bit harsher language than usual, so if that's offensive to you, please be sure to tune in next week. Otherwise, we hope you enjoy the episode. Please note also that in the first part of it, we did encounter a few audio issues, so most of those we have fixed or attempted to fix. But anyway, we just ask for your patience, and thank you, and hope you enjoy the episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 11 of Between Two Studs. I'm Alex Stud.
And I'm Ron Stud.
Ron, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good.
Now, Ron, I hope you know this. We got to bring our A game tonight. The guy we have on tonight has actually done like serious interviews with real people. Not that our guests haven't been real people, but you know what I mean? Like people who actually have Wikipedia pages. To me, that's when you've made it, right? Like to me, I've always said, like when I would become famous is if I had a Wikipedia page. I don't have a Wikipedia page yet.
I mean, neither do I, but I guess I do have credits with my voice acting career, right? But in all seriousness, let's get to a real professional, and let's get to our guest, Adam Barnard.
I mean, like, maybe a little bit, yeah.
Well, regardless, we're so glad for you to join us. Adam Barnard, thank you.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Adam, you know, we always ask guests a series of questions to get to know you and make sure everyone's kind of on the same page. The first question we always ask, how do you know us? What's your story? What's your connection to us?
Well, I know you, Alex, from college. You are friends with Matt Toll, which is how we met. Spent a lot of time together in college, and you were the best man at Matt's wedding, right?
That's right.
And that was the time when we really started to kick it and chat a little bit more. So that's where I know you. This is the first time meeting Ron, though. So can I call you Big Ron Stud?
Yes.
Has anyone ever called you that before?
Yes. I did participate in some backyard wrestling, though.
That's fantastic news.
Yeah.
And I hope that you went with something like Big Ron Stud. I was also, my notoriety in backyard wrestling, I hit somebody in the head with a frying pan in 1998. And that was the last time I was allowed to come back. So it was a really quite an extravaganza, but good. But this is my first time meeting Big Ron Stud here. So, but yeah, that's how Alex and I know each other. I can't recall if we ever drank together, though. Probably did, but I can't remember it if we did. So
I definitely went to some WCUR parties before I was even a member of WCUR because just my connection through Matt. I would just show up. So I have no doubt we had some Westchester fun together.
Those were legendary parties, man. It was like that time when Matt and I became like the executive committee of WCUR. Those parties were just out of control, man.
So speaking of drinking, what are you drinking tonight?
So right now I'm drinking, it's something called 2Xmas. It's a limited release by Southern Tier Brewing Company. It's basically like Christmas in a bottle. And I have two left. I've been kind of like, I don't drink as much as I used to. I don't really have time to breathe, but this is really fantastic stuff. So if you get a chance if you find it anywhere, it'll probably be out again next year, but if you get a chance to grab it, definitely pick it up.
Well, I'm a big fan of Southern Tier. I don't know if you know this. It's actually brewed right outside of Jamestown, New York. And Ron
no way.
Ron and I grew up very close, just south of Buffalo. So,
okay.
So Southern Tier, and obviously they merged with Victory Brewing a couple years back. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was not aware of that. Yeah, I haven't found a Southern Tier beer that I haven't liked yet. So this was just a random grab out here in Pittsburgh, and I was like, oh, this is great. So that's what I'm sipping on tonight.
Ron, what about yourself?
So I'm starting off with a little Malort, as it's kind of a tradition. So first, bottoms up to that.
Yep, mazel.
And the next is some special whiskey from my Infinity bottle.
Well done.
Yeah, it's pretty tasty tonight. So,
and let's transition over to you, Alex. What are you drinking tonight?
Well, you know, in honor of our guest tonight, I knew we got a guy who lives in Pittsburgh. I talked about this on a previous episode. Adam, I don't know if you're familiar with this. Super Punch Yanamico. Have you heard of this?
I have not, actually.
You have to pick up a bottle. You can only get this in Italy or Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's a really weird story, but long story short, because I already said this before, literally there was a guy back in the 50s who was an Italian American who was obsessed with this stuff. It reminded him of home, of his home country. And so he was like, how can I get this into the Italian neighborhoods of Italy? And the story goes, literally he made a connection and they were sending on pallets this super punch Yanamico. They were sending it to New Jersey, and he was driving to New Jersey, picking it up and bringing it back to Pittsburgh. And fast forward, he was giving it out to all like the Italian bars and restaurants and friends and family. And so to this day, it's really popular within the Italian American community. So you can only get this in Italy or in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
That is so crazy, man. I'll have to look for that. I'm actually, my wife and I are having a quarantine date night on Saturday. So I'll actually have to look for that because now you've piqued my interest. So I will definitely put that on the agenda.
It kind of tastes like bubble gum in the front and Jaeger in the back. Take that for what
so it's like the alcoholic mullet. It's like business in the front and then party in the back.
Totally. And in fact, people in Pittsburgh, I've heard people say and describe it as Italian Jaeger. So if you like Jaeger, it's in that vicinity.
Oh God, Jaeger! I have not had very solid experiences with Jägermeister before, but I'm willing to try anything once. So I'm down, and I'll live stream it to you. Maybe I
would love that.
So, Adam, I know leading into this episode, we talked a little bit about your professional podcasting, but talk to us a little bit about that, and then also a little bit about you and what are some of your interests?
Sure. So, where do I start? I've been doing the podcast now for about 2 years. My show's called Foundation Radio. Typically, new episodes air every Tuesday. Recently, just with everything going on between the transition out here from Philly to Pittsburgh, I've been slowing down a little bit, but now that I'm kind of getting back into my groove, I'm doing that. Otherwise, I'm a photographer. I've been shooting 35 millimeter film for about 20 years. I love it. It's, outside of my family, it's the passion of my life. I'm a big pro wrestling fan. I'm a hip hop head. I love every, I big old school 90s, early 2000s rap guy. Just pro wrestling and hip hop kind of saved my life in some pretty dark times. So, but those are, that's what I do in my off time. I'm a dad to three amazing kids. I've been married now. This will be my 9th year of marriage. But I've had some, but that's the thing is like, I've also had some really wild life experiences, which have translated into the things that I've done. And I think, we'll definitely talk about some of them here, but I find that my life is very much a random collection of just bizarre meetings and things that just fall into my lap. And it's always been like that my entire life. So, that's a nice little primer for me before we jump into this here.
Yeah, well, we're excited to unpack that. But we have one other question. We always ask our guests this, and we've gotten some crazy responses, but we love it. And I think it helps Ron and I kind of understand, we've kind of looked in the mirror and said, this is a reflection. People's response to this is a reflection of who we are in a way, right? The people we're bringing on. So pick a piece of art that represents you. It can be anything, can be a song, a movie. You mentioned hip hop earlier, whatever it is, and tell us about it.
I would say Good Will Hunting. That movie and the accompanying soundtrack, I'm a huge Elliott Smith fan, was instrumental in my life in shifting the paradigm to get where I am today. Had it not come back into my life the way that it did, I don't know if I would be sitting here talking to you right now, because I feel like every decision that I made was basically influenced by that scene with Matt Damon and Ben Affleck when they're standing at work. And he says, I want to wake up one morning and I don't want to see you here. I want you to know that you're gone. And that to me was it was paramount. It was something that was altering for me in a way when I sat down and I really thought and assessed my life. What I was doing wasn't working. Mm-hmm. And I had all of these abilities and these talents and avenues I had created for myself, and I wasn't doing anything with it. So that would be something that would represent me, I think, the most.
Well, I have to say that movie speaks a lot to me as well. And the scene that speaks to me the most, it's interesting, the one that you pointed out, is actually the scene in the Boston Public Gardens.
Yes.
Between Robin Williams
and
Damon. And in fact, I was living in Boston the day that they announced Robin Williams had killed himself. And
oh my God.
And I walked, I immediately, there was no like, I mean, I'm sure it was all over social media, but I don't know. I got out of work and I just walked to the bench because I knew where the bench was. I knew exactly where they filmed that scene. And there were hundreds of people who were writing inscriptions on the black, with chalk on the blacktop. And people had left flowers on the actual bench. And I took some photos with my Pixel 4 or my iPhone 4S at the time, but it was a really powerful moment because it showed obviously how many people right in the Boston area that movie spoke to, right? That particular bench, but that scene means a lot to me.
And to me as well. It's funny you mentioned that. When I took my family up to Boston in 2019, that was one of the places that I wanted to go and see that bench. Courtney and I had honeymooned in Boston in 2012, but for whatever reason, accident or design, we just never ended up at the Garden. So I was like, it's really important. I really want to go and see this because, Robin Williams is also a kind of he's a really important figure in my life. Childhood was pretty turbulent, but one thing that I could count on was Robin Williams being there to make me laugh and entertain me. So as I got older, growing and watching him take on the more serious roles, and then that scene as well, going to do that was like kind of almost like I don't want to say a pilgrimage in a lot of ways, but it was something that I felt like I needed to do and something that I felt like was going to help me just connect everything. Because if it hadn't been for this movie and it hadn't been for the things that were being said in the narrative, I wouldn't have my beautiful family, and I needed to go and experience this. So I sat on the bench. I had Courtney with my Canon AE1, and I held up the peace sign, and I'm sitting on the bench in Boston, and it's one of my favorite pictures. But yeah, totally, I couldn't agree with you more. It's just all around an incredible movie, and I think that is what represents me the most.
That's an awesome response, and actually on a very totally unrelated moment, but in that exact park, just so you know, a little fun aside, that's the park I proposed to my now wife.
Oh, no shit. That's amazing.
Completely coincidence. Had nothing to do with Robin Williams. But
it just was there. Yeah.
That's obviously
awesome,
my wife, who you've met, Hannah.
Yeah.
We met in Boston. We actually had our first kiss in that park. So I proposed to her in front of the exact bench that we first had our first kiss, which was not the Robin Williams bench. But same, so that park actually has a lot of importance to me for Robin Williams and for that's right.
And for the personal level.
Right,
yeah.
right.
That's amazing, man. That's amazing.
So on a less serious note, what are your thoughts on the sequel, Good Will Hunting 2, Hunting Season?
A classic.
It's a true shame it didn't come out.
I had my reservations, but when I saw that scene where he's just pumping him full of lead, it's the work of Shakespeare, really. I think and it's criminal that it hasn't been released yet. So I'm looking forward to the day that it comes out.
All right, Adam. Well, you made it through our fire round. I have to say, for our fire round, that went a little bit somber, but I have to say, I really like your response on that.
I think what's so beautiful about that movie, though, is the fact that I think, and another reason what makes movies so fantastic, these particular types of movies, is the directors are trusting the actors and the actresses, the people who are performing, allows them to explore the role in a way that lets them deviate. Robin Williams was classic, just internationally known. I mean, he was renowned for improvising. So the scene where he's talking about his wife farting in bed when she got nervous, that was all improv. That they had not rehearsed that before they shot the scene. And if you watch the scene when Matt Damon is like pissing himself laughing, the camera is shaking because the camera guy and all the operators and stuff, they're all laughing their asses off. And it was such a perfect scene that they were like, we're not shooting this again. We would never be able to recapture this. So I think a lot of those reactions and a lot of the things that they were saying to each other and a lot of the interactions were all real. I mean, it just feels there's a realism that is so important to that movie that I think hadn't have been done that way, I don't think it would have been as impactful. But Yeah, I mean that when he talks about that whole scene, I mean that in essence is like the crux of my sort of genesis, rebirth or regenesis or whatever you want to call it. It's this idea that like I can know all of these things and I can explore all these things, but if I don't actually go and do anything, and if I don't actually live, I'm not doing it. Not living. You know what I'm saying? You're wasting your entire. It's from A Bronx Tale, right? Sonny had 5 fingers and he only used 3. Right? The saddest thing in life is wasted talent. That's right. Another class. It's just the same idea. I could watch that movie all day, every day. But back onto a little bit more. Happier notes here.
Hey, kind of switching topics. Kind of want to talk a little bit about your day-to-day life. I know that you've been residential property manager for quite some time at different locations. And it's funny, I just bought my first place a year and a half ago, but I'd been renting.
Good for you, man.
I'd been renting for a really long time.
Yeah.
What are some tips and tricks that you would tell people who are in that apartment hunt?
I've been in property management for about 10 years now. And the one thing I would say to anyone who is looking, especially right now during COVID, trust us. We're giving you the right information. Trust us. I'm not trying to, no one on my team, one thing I pride myself on as well. I'm honest to a fault. And I have a way that disarms people and gets them to trust me just by interacting and talking and finding something that's connective. And that's just sales, right? You either have it or you don't. But trust me, if I'm telling you this and I'm giving you the scoop on what this is, I'm not selling you a bag of shit. This is my job. And my job is to find you housing and find you a place to stay. And go easy on us. Go easy on the people that are working in your leasing staff. Go easy on the people that are working in the property management staff, because a lot of these folks are dealing with cost-cutting measures. A lot of them didn't get year-end bonuses that they were probably budgeting on. A lot of them probably had staff cuts and resource cuts because of the pandemic. So it's even more difficult to do our job. But don't lease at the first place you see. I know that sounds wrong too to say as a salesperson, but do the work to make sure you're getting all the right information before you lock into a lease. Because once you lock in somewhere that doesn't have someone like me working at the office, you're not going to be in for a real good time. So those are like pretty good. Oh, also, if there's a leak in your apartment, please tell me, for the love of God. Like, don't wait for a week and a half and be like, oh, my toilet's leaking, and it's fucking dripping down the ceiling into 3 apartments beneath you. It's like, oh my God. Like, I can tell you, I have 100,000 horror stories that I could share with you.
Oh, we want to hear one, by the way.
Yeah. I will. I'll give you a good one. Yeah. But I fell into this career by accident in college, and I'm now 10 years into it. And there are a few things that I do like about it. And one of them is that every day is different. Every single day is different, and you never walk in and have the same issue happen again. So yeah, just tell us about water leaks. Like, seriously, just don't. Oh, and another thing, don't put grease down the garbage disposal. You will destroy the pipes in the building. But yeah, okay, that's it. That's it for tips. Follow me for more recipes and tips, though.
All right. So just to be clear, when the water is leaking and you're upstairs, you want to wait until it's 2, or is it 3 units below you that is experiencing all the water damage, or are you supposed to go before that?
I would say, like, maybe as it's happening. Like, as soon as you know it's happening, you want to give me a call. Or, I mean, if you don't want to, you could wait 12 hours and just have the ceiling fall down. That's cool, too.
I mean, as long as you're on the top floor, that's all that matters, because it's kind of trickle-down economics, right?
That's what Reagan says. It just trickles down. It just comes down, and the wealth is spread to everyone, which works with water, surprisingly enough, as much as it doesn't work with economics. But it does work with water. So, yeah, I mean, I have seen, like, you would be amazed to know. Sometimes it is baffling when I think about the level of, like, cognitive disconnection, I guess is the right phrase for it, when people know something is happening and they don't call you, right? Like, someone lives on the 16th floor of the building and they got a freaking leak from their tub, and they're like, oh, it's been leaking for a couple of days under the sink. And it's like, a couple of days? Like, what the hell, man? Call me. Like, now we have and then also too, like, according to your lease, like, people don't read the lease all the time, but like, per lease agreement, you're responsible for not just the damage in your apartment, but anybody else's that was affected, because you just disclosed to me that you knew about this for a couple of days. So then we got to back charge everything. It's a freaking nightmare. So just tell me right away if you have water issues. Even if you think you might have a water issue, but you can't see it for sure, just let me know and be safer. Yeah.
All right. So speaking of horrors and nightmares, tell us, what is the worst thing that you've seen?
Oh, man. I found a dead guy once who had been dead in his apartment for 3 weeks.
Wait, you were the one who found the body.
Uh-huh.
Oh my God.
So I'm going to be really careful how I say this. I'm going to try to be as thoughtful as I can on this. So you just forgive me.
Be as diplomatic as you can.
Yeah. So in one of the areas that I worked, their requirements were that you inspect every apartment every year in order to receive an update on your certificate of occupancy and your housing license. At one of the properties I worked, it had 3 buildings. This was day 2 of the inspections. And we were on the 3rd floor of the building, right in the middle of the row. So the buildings were shaped like a big C, right? Like just put a big giant C in the ground, and that we were right smack dab in the middle of the C.
Okay.
Top floor. It's me. It's my boss. It's the maintenance super and a representative from the township or borough, wherever we were. We knock on the door. Now, mind you, we have master keys on everything, so we don't need to check out keys. We're knocking on the door or nothing. Maintenance super opens the door. And right away, you get that unmistakable smell coming from the apartment.
So was this just so we know? Was this like from a wellness check? What was the origin of this?
So this was part of that inspection. So every year it was part. So like you give out your notices and you're like, hey, we're going to come in for 5 minutes. Basically, what you do is they want to make sure that there's no issues with plumbing, that the smoke detectors are working, that everything looks like it's in working order, right? That we're taking care of the place. So maintenance super opens the door. The smell hits us in the face. And he closes the door and he goes, that guy is either sleeping or he's dead. And I was like, well, Jesus Christ, that's a huge fucking swath. And I'm not gagging, but I'm like, oh my God, that smell is unmistakable. If you've never smelled it, you can smell it, right? So we wait a minute, we knock on the door again, and he opens the door, and I'm like, get out of my way, let me look. And as I move him out of the way, the guy is laying on his sofa, right? So he's got his hand kind of on his chest, right between where his chest would be. And his leg is up. His right leg is up, bent on the sofa. And he's laying down. Almost looks like he has a smirk on his face. His TV is on. His mail is on the table with his keys on top of the mail. And his jacket is on. So dude basically went and got his mail, sat down on the sofa and had a coronary. The coroner thought he was dead for 3 weeks. I have never seen someone that shade of green. It was the most horrific thing I have ever seen. His fingers, his extremities were all black, it was black almost all the way up his hand. He had the features, basically he was melting into the sofa. So we had to close the door, call the police. They had to come out and basically, so the building was large enough. They had to section off, they had to close the front entrance of the building. Is Alex gagging?
No idea why I'm laughing. This is horrible, but I'm just laughing.
It is. It was horrific. It took me a long time to not think about it. Yeah. And so they had to section off the front of the building. So the coroner and the police department came out. They closed the front entrance. They closed the side entrance to the building. And they wouldn't let anybody up and down on the elevator because they had to basically put this guy in a body bag. So they put him in the body bag. They put him in the stretcher. He will get in the stretcher because dude was 6'6", 6'7", but no one else can get in the elevator with him. So they have to wheel him into the elevator and send him down 3 floors to the first floor by himself. So we hear the ding and they hear the door close and then you hear boom, 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 all these people running down the stairs to try to catch him before anybody else gets in the building. Yeah, we had to give statements and fingerprints and it was a nightmare because, once you touch the door handle, that's a crime scene. When you find someone, they assume it's a crime until it's proven otherwise. So I had to give fingerprints. I had to give a statement to the police. It was a long day. I had just quit smoking maybe 6 months before that. And that was the closest I had come to lighting up again. I was like, well, here we go. It was horrific. That was the worst thing I had ever seen.
We're going to take a quick break.
Yeah, we should, right? We should probably sip up, right?
When we come back, I don't even know where we go from this, but we're going to find a way. Adam Barnard, thank you so much.
If you're all the way through your last binged podcast and looking for something new, then Foundation Radio has you covered. Interviews, politics, beer drinking, pro wrestling, Dungeons and Dragons, we have something for everyone. Stream the new episodes every Tuesday wherever you find your favorite podcasts. You can find all of our archive at foundationradio.net. You can also follow us on Instagram at foundation_radio. Foundation Radio, something for everyone.
Hey listeners, it's Ron here. I wanted to take a quick moment to tell you about our newly launched website, twostuds.com. That's TWOSTUDDS.com. There you'll find blog entries and postings about all of our recent episodes, and you'll also be able to see how to get in touch with us and all sorts of other information about your favorite hosts, Ron and Alex Studd. We hope you'll check it out.
And we're back with Adam Barnard. He's telling us about the dead guy he stumbled upon.
Listen, you guys wanted a horror story. I didn't even tell you about the time that I had actual literal human shit in the sub-basement of one of the properties in Philadelphia. So,
well, now you do.
I figured the dead guy trumps everything.
Now you have to tell us that.
I'm not sure I want to hear about that. I mean, I've heard of enough wonderful things in Philly. I'm not sure we need to add anything more to the list.
There is a system in most sub-basements. It's called a sewage ejection pit. The pumps that shoot the shit into the pit failed. And then we ended up with probably, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 inches of human waste in the basement because it wasn't filtering out anywhere. So that's what the pits do. They shoot it out into into the shit pit, and then it filters out into the plumbing and the sewers. And that didn't happen. So, and then also on top of that, the shit had, like, basically the shit water had gone into the elevator pit and had fried the mechanical components of the freight elevator that we had, which then took, I think it was about 4 or 5 months and maybe $70,000 to repair.
Oh my
Lord! Yeah,
holy shit!
Mm-hmm. Well, holy shit, literally, Alex Studd. Yeah.
Thanks to you, I'm going to think completely differently on the term "shoot the shit."
Adam, I do have one other question before we move on. You know, someone told me this the other day, and it didn't comprehend. Someone said to me that somewhere between 5 and 6% of people are hoarders, and that number just seemed crazy. That's 1 in 20 people. Is that actually true? Like, your experience are 1 in 20 people actually hoarders in this country?
Yes, it has been my experience, not just in property management, but also when I was a volunteer firefighter for 5.5 years. My very first, what they call a tactical box, so it's like an actual address of fire, was inside of a hoarder house. And I shit you not, the pathways, if you just take your hands and put them on your hips and just move out maybe like 1/4 of an inch, that's about as much room as you had to walk. So we're carrying fully charged hose lines, 1 3/4 lines up the stairs with the full on like proton packs with your breathing apparatus. And you have this heavy ass gear and all the tools you need to get in. And it's pathways. But yes, I can say with certainty that 1 in 20 sounds about right.
Yeesh.
Yeah.
Well, and they live amongst us. Like, they're normal people other than what's inside their home.
And it's always the last person you would imagine. It's always the last person that you would think is the hoarder that has so much shit piled high to the ceiling. When we moved from our home in Coatesville, we tried to live very minimally. And part of that reason is because of all the things I've seen. I never want someone to come into my house and be like, "Oh my God, look at all this shit everywhere." It's like, it's a thing. But yeah, it's always the last person you think it is, and it's typically way worse than you would imagine.
Now, be honest with us too. Mm-hmm. Given the situation, was there some lingering suspicion in the back of your head that maybe it was a mercy to just let the whole place burn?
So with that fire, the power strips, he had plugged like several of them into each other and to turn on a lamp. And when he flipped the switch on, it created like an arc. You could see it on the wall. It came up. So if the outlet is here, it probably came up about 6 to 8 inches and seared the wall and caught the material on fire. At a certain point, you have to say to yourself, like, maybe this would be like, it would be better to just let the place burn just for the structural damage. Obviously like the human loss and you don't want anything like that. But like, as far as the structural damage and the filth that comes along with that, with rodents, the waste material of that, because I know of hoarders that hoard their own waste, food. It's disgusting. So I would say at a certain point, like, yeah, in order to rebuild and just clear out completely, like sometimes it's like, yeah, it might be a mercy thing, but it's pretty gnarly when you see it in person. And again, much worse than anything you could ever imagine. People have cats in the freezer. It's a nightmare.
Hey, so Adam, during a pandemic, you and 3 kids from Philly to Pittsburgh. What was that like, and how are you enjoying Pittsburgh?
Well, it was a nightmare, first and foremost. No, it wasn't. It was fantastic. I love Philly and the surrounding areas. I grew up in Philly my entire life. Pittsburgh has been a place one of my best friends in the whole world, Chris Weddy, went to school out here at the University of Pittsburgh. So I would come to visit him like 3 or 4 times a year and spend about a week each time. And I just fell in love with the city, love everything about it, love the history, love the scenery, love the bars, love the food. So getting an opportunity to come out here with my company was a step for me in a larger role eventually with the company I'm with. It actually wasn't as terrible as it sounds. We were lucky we were able to get set up with housing pretty quickly and selling our house. We put the house on the market on a Monday. We had our first offer that night and we were under contract within 72 hours. So it wasn't like as bad as I thought it was going to be, but it definitely is taking some adjusting to getting used to. So for example, the people in Pittsburgh aren't nearly as nice as the people in Philadelphia. And I know that sounds ridiculous to say because people in Philadelphia aren't that nice all the time, but at least like little things, like when you say, oh, excuse me, you're at the grocery store and you like kind of walk in front of somebody. Oh, hey, I'm sorry. Excuse me. They just stare at you here like you got 16 heads. They in Philly.
Yeah, but come on. They got the Pittsburgh left. They got yins.
See, I don't even understand that shit. The yins, like somebody's like, "Oh, you're from Philly. You say John." I don't fucking say John. I don't even like who says John? What are you talking about? And I'm here, like I'm not a tough guy, but I got the Philly edge to me a little bit sometimes. And like people are just like, "Who the fuck are you?" And I got to remember, like I'm not in Philadelphia anymore. Like people don't respond to that very well. And I like, it's been an interesting change in. It's been an interesting change in dynamic and scenery. One thing that really bothers me though about people in Pittsburgh is they are not as on top of the mask thing as Philadelphia is. There are a lot of folks here that walk around without masks on all the time.
I'm shocked.
It drives me insane. Because it literally, and the people that make me laugh the most are like, "Oh, I forgot my mask." We've been doing this for a year now, guys. This should not be a surprise to anyone. We should, like you can't go in any store without a mask. That's the one thing I think that really bothers me. But other than that, I mean, I love the city. I love it here.
Hey, Adam, last question about Pittsburgh, and then
yeah.
I gotta ask. This is a yes or no, or a good agree, disagree situation. French fries on your sandwich. Yes or no?
Yes, but it has to be done. Yes, but you have to get it fresh. Because if you take it back to your office, you take it back to your apartment or your house, and it's soggy, throw it in the garbage. Absolutely. But I'm a recovering fat kid, so it's anything. And French fries on anything is fantastic. So
I think you know this. My wife, her whole family's from Pittsburgh originally.
Oh.
So from my aunties, they're all about it. And I can't quite get the whole French fry thing on the sandwich, but people love it.
They put it on salads too. They were like, "Oh, you want French fries on salad?" Like, what? What are you talking about? French? Of course I do. That. First of all, yes, the answer is yes. But second of all, how come I haven't heard about this until right now? But yeah,
it hasn't gone national yet.
Now I gotta ask though,
it will.
Is there ever like where they do the French fries with cheese, like a poutine kind of thing going, or no?
Nothing like that I found. No, no like cheese whiz or anything. Like something you would find in Philly that's just like totally disgusting. Like here's a.
I mean, to be fair though, the whiz wit is pretty good.
Yeah. It is a cheat whiz wit, and that's telling people how to order food. Like when you come from Philly and you're talking to people in Pittsburgh about cheesesteaks, you're like, "Yo, you go to that window, you better know what the fuck you're ordering right away, because if you don't, they're gonna grab you by the collar and pull you out, man. Go and order a whiz wit. Trust me, just say those words. I know it doesn't make any sense, but just say it and get out of the way and just go pay. Yeah." But no, I'm really enjoying my time in Pittsburgh, and the kids are settling in nice. We got them in a great school, and it's cool, man. It's a cool place.
Good. We're glad to hear that. Hey, so I do want to switch gears.
Yeah.
Obviously we're talking on a podcast, and Ron and I, our listeners have been very patient. We're kind of stumbling through this. We're learning. What kind of recommendations, as someone who's been doing podcasts for a long time, give us some recommendations. What can we be doing?
That's a tough question, because I typically, honestly, my best shows have been the ones on the fly, where you have a baseline idea and you just kind of roll with it. Make sure you have a topic, though. Make sure you have a specific theme or a topic that you're going to go with. The episode we did about drunk history, taking shots of tequila and talking about random history facts. Sounds ridiculous on paper, but it was actually kind of fun to listen to. The beer summit, that stemmed from an argument between two of my co-hosts, Joe Keane and Jeff Quinn, about whether Ham's beer was better than Miller High Life.
Which is absurd.
It's ridiculous.
I listened to that episode, And Hams is got to be. I live in the heart country in Chicago of ham. This is Ham's country.
Right.
Ham's a terrible, terrible beer.
Look, compared to Miller High Life, like they're both just terrible, terrible beers, right? Like they're in and of itself. But surprisingly enough, Ham's was actually one of the better beers that we drank that morning.
Oh, I know. I listened to the episode and they kept talking about how it's a pleasant cleanser.
It's a
palate cleanser.
It is a palate cleanser. And then you can go back to and you're like, fuck, this is really good. Like, I guess maybe it was just because we were drunk at 9:30 in the morning on a Saturday, or that it was just like all the other beer was terrible. I mean, not all of it, but most of it. And it was just a fascinating time to like do something, right? But have a plan, have a goal in mind that you want with the show, have a target, and don't do it for anybody else but yourself, right? Make your content for you and think about the things that you would want to listen to and do that and be happy with it. Don't worry about what everybody else is going to say, because if you worry about what everybody else is going to say about your show, you're never going to get anywhere. Focus on the things that you want to do and what you think is cool, and people will go for it. It's the same thing when I got the interview in college with Neil deGrasse Tyson. I didn't know if anybody knew who the fuck he was, but I did. And I knew that I had a bunch of questions that I wanted to talk to him about. And it was a really popular interview. And it was one of the coolest things I've ever done. So make sure you have a goal, you have a game plan, and do the shows that you want to do. And your followers and your people that are going to listen will eventually, they'll find their way to you.
So backing off of that last question, you've had a lot of really interesting guests, including Neil deGrasse Tyson, Brandon Novak, Jess Asheroth, Tommy Chong,
Margera.
I mean, the list goes goes on.
Yeah.
I feel like it's like one of those infomercials about the greatest bands of the 70s. How did you get these people on your show?
So Brandon and Jess, I've known for probably close to 12 or 13 years. I was involved with the CKY crew for a period of time. So getting them was just a matter of, hey, Novak, can you come on the show this week? Yeah, man, no problem. I'll be there. Tell me when to sign up. I also, and a random story, I won't share this here, but you'll have to buy Novak's book when it comes out to hear it. I saved Novak's life one time, which about less than 10 years later, which ended up allowing me to meet Hulk Hogan in person.
Wow.
So that is one of the most wild stories of my life. But Novak, that was like my, I'm going to come to you one day for a favor kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, it was just as easy as calling them and getting them on the phone. Asher Roth, I wrote a piece for in one of the newspapers I wrote for back home, linked up with him just through his website. And we made a rapport right around the time that the pandemic hit. We were supposed to get together in person. He had a new record that came out, and we ended up just linking up on Discord. Tommy Chong was as easy as hitting him up on Twitter and getting his information. Got his email, went to his publicist, got his cell phone number. Boom, we were in business. It's really kind of surprising how accessible some of these folks are. You just have to pitch yourself the right way. And once you're able to start, if you can present yourself in a way that's going to make it meaningful for them to be on your show, a lot of these cats won't come onto the show unless they're like promoting something or unless they have something going on, right? Sure. Asher Roth, great example. Asher Roth's a fantastic guy. Love him. He's super intelligent, just like 3 or 5 steps ahead of everybody in his thought processes, right? He's the kind of guy, when he's promoting this album, he's like, yeah, this is going to make the most sense. Let's do it. Let's have this really deep intellectual conversation. And it basically became one of the talking points in conversations about the album. So for me to have a piece of content like that, to be like, holy shit, it's connected to this really incredible album, and we're having these really deep conversations about it being created, it's pretty cool. But you have to be able to spin it to them that's going to make it in a way that it'll be successful for both of them. And again, it's about asking the right questions. You guys seem to do that already. So it's just about asking the right questions and giving them leading questions. That's the easiest way to do it.
Wow. That's really insightful. So tying in everything that you know and the experience and everything you just threw at us, what you're saying is the way to get Hulk Hogan on is to ask him about his illustrious music career and the traveling boot band. Am I hearing you right?
I would agree with that. That would probably be the best way, brother, to do that, is to do that. I will tell you, though, that he is not accepting interview requests this time because I asked. But the best way to do that is to probably just, put on, send a photograph of you holding the guitar, maybe at a construction site on top of a mountain somewhere. No, I'm just kidding. No, yeah. I mean, really, it's just about, it's finding your voice, finding the way you want to do things, finding the presentation that you want. And as long as you're curious about what they have to say and you can dig a little bit deeper, that's the way it gets started. That's the easiest way to do it.
Well, and it sounds like it never hurts to ask.
Right.
What do you have to lose?
Exactly. All they say is no. If they say no, okay, how many times it gets shot down by a couple different people before Tommy Chong's people say, yeah, let's do it. So.
Yeah. One question kind of in parallel with that, though, is, Ron and I, not to say this in a bad way, but we brought on people we know. We've had rapport. We're having fun. And they're kind of puff pieces, right? Tell us about what's going on in your world and let's have a good time. Let's talk about a dead guy that you found, right? In your case. But
let's shoot the shit.
Yeah, shoot the shit. Yeah.
But, I've listened to a couple of your episodes and there's some, not in a bad way, like I like to discuss controversial topics, but controversial topics nonetheless. And, I think about that, like, well, or all of a sudden, are you alienating half of your audience? Like, what does that mean? Like, what's your thought process? Do you not care? Like, what do you do if you have a guest that you want to respect, but at the same time you totally disagree with them on? Like, talk to us about that.
So it's funny you say that. We have a show that we're going to be recording next Wednesday. A friend of mine is he's a socialist leaning person, like a Bernie Sanders type of guy. But voted for Donald Trump in the last election.
Wow.
Military guy.
Okay.
A Marine vet. Very much like when we talk about things, we share a lot of the same viewpoints as far as progressive politics when it comes to economics, when it comes to the state of like vets and how things are handled there, housing crisis, things of that nature. But he voted for Donald Trump. And I was just fascinated. And I remember saying to him, like, what caused you to do that? And I said, save it for the show. Because I want to be able to have these conversations with you and want people to listen to this. Because as much as we want to drown out people like that sometimes that are very, like the whole MAGA shit, you want to drown that out. I feel like for me, it's important to challenge people on that. Not in a way that's like super aggressive, but like, I need to know why you did this because I have a lot of questions, right? I've always been very authentic and true to how I approach things. So as far as controversial topics for me, I mean, if you don't want to listen to the show, there's 100 other shows you can listen to that'll give you the puff shit you want to hear. If you want to listen to somebody big up Rush Limbaugh, there's 16 other people there's 16 other shows that'll do that for you, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be someone that talks about how I see the world and how I view things. And I want to challenge people's perceptions and I want to be authentic about the material that I'm presenting. Especially when it comes to things like Portland, when it comes to things like George Floyd in the summer, COVID, all the sort of particular shows that we did. January 6, 2021 was another great example of the insurrection that happened at the Capitol. Mm-hmm. For me, it was important to capture that emotion and to capture that feeling at that moment to talk about it. Because these are really important things. Eventually, someday my kids and maybe even my grandkids will find this content and want to know where I stood. And now they will be able to do that. So for me, it's not just an authenticity. It's also about making sure that I am able to say, like, this is the side of history that I'm on and using my privilege in order to amplify voices that may not have been able to have that standing otherwise in order to design. So I'm never scared about anybody telling me to fuck off on Twitter, me up on Instagram and saying some shit about my, my progressive views and this, that, and the other. Like, don't listen to my show. Find something else that's going to make your feet tingle. It's just clearly not my show. So, but yeah, I mean, I've only ever had to though bleep out one word on the show. One time, one show, I had to bleep out some content. But other than that, we record right to tape, and I do very minimal editing most times, unless it's like a super huge fuck up.
No, that makes sense because I think that there's something to be said about, Alex and I've talked about it before, about how podcasting as a medium certainly allows itself to really lend it to kind of giving you a bit of the unpolished version of the story about the way things really kind of show in real life, right? And I think that resonates with a lot of guests,
right? A
lot of listeners and guests to kind of be, hey, you can say exactly how you feel. You tell us exactly who you are, whether or not that offends people. It's that's kind of one of those things with podcasting.
Okay, one thing I just wanted to quickly touch on about that as well is just another reason why I'd kind of just record a tape as well is because it does it allows me to present something that is not going to be considered or construed as bias. I tend not to prep for conversations like that unless it's like very quick viewpoints and then just kind of go from the gut, right? Because I already know where I stand on most things. So when I think about that and I say, okay, well, this is where I want to go. This is how I want the story to progress. I have an idea of what points I'm going to hit. But I never want to give somebody the impression that I'm cutting them to making them sound bad, right? One of the things that I learned early on, especially when talking to people like, Bill Goldberg or Asher Roth, you're presenting their voice in a way they're trusting you with their story and their voice and what they want to have put out into the world. So it's my responsibility, not just as a podcaster, but essentially a journalist who's telling a story about that person particularly. They're trusting me with that. And that trust is huge. So I never fuck around with anything like that. I never make it sound like anything is weird. If it's a section that's like doesn't fit inside of the general storyline, I cut it out completely and make sure that the narrative flows. So yeah, I mean, there is something to be said about that raw sort of uncut feeling of a podcast because you're getting that, you're getting that authenticity.
So I know that you've had multiple guests at a time. So far, Alex and I, we've only had one guest at a time. How do you handle that?
Very carefully. So initially, we had a setup that we would do at my old place. We would just sit in the kitchen or we would go to Jeff Quinn's house in Philadelphia, and we had microphones and a little board that we would set up and we would record together. Doing the virtual recording has been a little difficult just because not everybody's sound is good quality. Not everybody has like a blue snowball or some kind of microphone that they could record into. So the sound levels are much different than they usually are. It can be trying to try to level everything together. But I feel like now that we have a routine in place and now that we have our systems together, it's a lot easier to do. But it does present challenges, especially when we're trying to do something a little bit more topical. Trying to get everybody together and saying, hey guys, let's put something together now. Let's do this. Let's do that. It does present a challenge. I typically have not had any more if it's an interview, it's typically one-on-one, unless it's a very special interview. I have some things in the pipeline that I can't talk about that because I'm waiting for them to get confirmed, but it would be like my first 3-person interview.
Wow.
So that would be, me plus 2 other people. So that to me is going to be sort of a logistical challenge just because I'm used to running the show with that. Once you have your setup figured out, like obviously what you guys have is working really well. So once you have your setup down, then everything falls into place from there.
That's very cool. Well, so with that note, Adam, you haven't really talked about specifically your podcast. Where can we find you?
Yeah, well, so my podcast, again, it's called Foundation Radio. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Stitcher. I don't know if we're on Pandora yet, but I know we're on iHeartRadio. Anywhere you can find your favorite podcast, you go to foundationradio.net. foundationradio.net, and you'll find any show there. All the archive is there as well. You can listen to all the interviews, all the past shows that we've done. You can also go to thisisgoober.com, and you can find all of my information about my photography, all of my writing, my blogging that I've been doing, all of my past work that I've done for Live for Live Music with live shows. All of my stuff is going to be right through there, and it'll feed you out to anywhere else you want to go. Any listens that you could give me, I would greatly appreciate it. And any feedback I get, it only helps me get better. So,
of course, we are so thankful for you to join us, Adam. We've had a lot of fun outside of hearing about the dead guy. That was a little scary.
Poor Alex. I mean,
sorry about that.
Our listeners don't get to see the video, but you could definitely tell, Adam, you could probably vouch for this. Alex's face definitely went morose green as you were telling him some of the story. And
it did, yeah.
I don't know why. I mean, it was very troubling.
If you guys, if you guys are recording the audio, I hope, or the video rather, I hope I can share that on my social media because that face was just absolutely brilliant. It was just like I thought he was getting sick, and then I realized he was laughing, and then I'm like, well, is he laughing because he's trying not to puke right now? What's going on?
That awkward reaction.
Yeah, tell me about it. I was the one that found the fucking guy. It was fucking disgusting, man. Yeah, fellas, thank you so much for having me. This has been a pleasure. I rarely get to be the person that's talked about. So this has been so much fun, and I really appreciate you guys having me on. This has been a lot of fun.
Well, thank you so much, Adam.
Absolutely.
Thanks. Alex.
Yeah, we've had a lot of fun, and we can't wait to have you back on at some point.
Anytime. Yeah. And next time we have something going on the show, I'll definitely have you both on, Alex and Big Ron Stud. So
got it.
We'd love to be on as long as I don't have to drink Ham's beer.
You do not have to drink any beer you don't want to. Now, I will say that if we do end up doing the breakfast meat off Super Showdown, you'll have to pick a specific meat from your particular area in order to talk about, but you'll have to ship it to us so we can all eat it together. So that's the only caveat. So
That's fair.
Done. I can do that.
all right, fellas. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
And,
All right, see you.
remember, check them out on foundationradio.net. Thank you very much, Adam. Have a good one.
Thanks. You too, guys. Peace.